Today, there are 10 times as many daily users of marijuana than there were 30 years ago. And marijuana is fully legal and commercialized in 19 states. The marijuana industry, which is funded heavily by big tobacco, is pushing hard for the legalization and commercialization of today's high-potent marijuana. So now is a good time to review what we've learned about the consequences of legalization, starting with the health effects of pot. Despite the industry spending millions of dollars to convince you that marijuana is harmless or even good for you, the research is clear. Today's highly potent marijuana increases the risk of heart problems, is linked to cancer, including testicular cancer, doubles the odds of a miscarriage among women whose partners use at least once a week, increases the risk of psychosis at least 5 times among daily users, significantly increases the risk for suicide and the risk of suicidal thoughts and behaviors, especially among veterans with PTSD, and is associated with further use, misuse, dependence, and addiction on other drugs, such as tobacco, alcohol, and opioids. Today's marijuana has been engineered to be up to 100% pure THC, a far cry from the Woodstock weed where THC levels hovered around 3 to 5%. And this high-potency marijuana has contributed to addiction rates higher than we've ever seen. At least 1 in 3 people who used marijuana in the past year meet the criteria for cannabis use disorder or addiction. It's not rocket science. When you legalize marijuana for adults, use goes up, especially among young people. Rates of marijuana use disorder, for example, increased 25% among 12 to 17-year-olds in legal states versus non-legal states. But what about the argument that since alcohol and tobacco are legal, marijuana should be legal too? But that argument is flawed in at least 2 ways. 1, marijuana carries greater mental health risks than those drugs and is more detrimental to the heart and brain. And 2, even if marijuana were no more harmful than alcohol and tobacco, why would we want to increase the availability and consumption of just another toxic and addictive substance? That's kind of like saying, since my headlights are broken, I think I'll break my taillights too, just to be consistent. We are already in the midst of an unprecedented mental health and addiction crisis. Why pour gas on the fire? What about the libertarian argument? The argument that even if all of the above is true, what I do to my own body is my own business, not yours and not the government's. If only that were the case. Marijuana smoke produces at least 4 times as much lung-damaging particulate matter as tobacco smoke, meaning the secondhand smoke results can be worse, and marijuana contains many of the same cancer-causing chemicals. As people that live in areas with legal marijuana can tell you, you are now breathing in far more toxic marijuana smoke than you ever have before. Whether they're at the park, on the road, or even at home, smelling marijuana from your neighbor's place. Pot can travel hundreds of feet from its source. If you live in a multi-unit condo building, for example, with a shared ventilation system, you're especially at risk of being forced to breathe in whatever your neighbors are smoking or vaping. The American Non-Smoking Rights Foundation, the group that we can thank for not having to breathe in tobacco smoke at restaurants or in airplanes, they're reporting far more people calling them complaining about secondhand marijuana smoke in their homes. We are also witnessing increasing rates of high driving in legalized states, putting us all at greater danger on the road. Since marijuana was legalized in Colorado, for example, car crashes involving marijuana have skyrocketed over 150%, and they've doubled in Washington state. Marijuana use puts us all at greater danger in the workplace as well. Studies from groups like Quest Diagnostics have shown that legalized states have the highest rates of marijuana positives. Crime goes up too. Rates of assault rose in Oregon after legalization and in other states. And in addition, research has shown that if you live near a pot shop, you're much more likely to see increases in crime. So no, it's not an individual rights issue. It's a community health and safety problem. Now, some advocates will say that they want to legalize marijuana because they believe the penalties have historically been too high for marijuana possession and that they've hurt people of color. If your goal is to lessen the penalties of use, why would you also want to commercialize marijuana, creating a multi-billion-dollar industry where it can be sold and advertised, benefiting big business? That's because most legalizers aren't actually interested in social justice. Legalization is about creating a new addiction for profit industry. It's about creating new users, lifelong customers, and to line the pockets of big tobacco, big alcohol, and big pharma. The vast majority of pot dispensaries are located in poorer communities of color. Hardly social justice. And by the way, Getting caught with marijuana has never been a major source of incarceration in our country. People that are in prison for marijuana comprise fewer than 1% of the federal population, and even if you look at all drugs, it's fewer than 3% of the state population. Another argument made by the pot industry is that legalizing the drug will eliminate or greatly reduce the underground market. But we've actually seen the opposite's been the case. Why? Because legalization increases demand, the legal market can't keep up, and illegal sellers are more than happy to sell to people the legal market won't. For example, to young people. So we've seen the underground market thriving, driven in large part by foreign cartels and other criminal enterprises. In one Northern California community, for example, there are over 10,000 illegal pot grows, representing one pot grow for every 9 residents. For all of these reasons, we should not legalize and commercialize marijuana. We don't need to criminalize it either, but in order to right the wrongs of the past, let's not create a new problem and make it much worse. We don't need another big tobacco, we don't need another big alcohol, and we certainly don't need another big pharma. We can avoid the harm big pot would cause for countless more users and non-users in the coming years. I'm Kevin Sabet, along with Patrick Kennedy, the co-founder of Smart Approaches to Marijuana and its CEO. You can find out more, donate, or support us at our website, learnaboutsam.org.